Alright guys, what's happening? Today we are going to talk about the basics of S&C and how to get them right. Because a lot of the time what you see on Instagram and what you see on Facebook or wherever you get your kind of social media S&C stuff from, whilst there's a lot of good stuff, there's a lot of terrible stuff. So today we're going to sort out the kind of good stuff from the terrible stuff. So your first kind of question when you're training should be, it should always come back to what is it that I'm trying to train? Is it obvious what the exercise or the program that I'm doing, is it obvious what that is trying to improve? So if we're going to ask what is it we're training, we have to know what qualities we want to be training. So I like to break kind of the basics down to strength, power, speed, endurance, and also kind of sub one is agility. Now if you think about, I'll say field sports, but pretty much every sport, minus the kind of obvious ones like darts and pool and stuff, they all involve some, or at least a little bit of each quality. So you take two sports that are or look to the eye massively different, and say American football and tennis. Both of these sports, although they look really different, they all require some of those kind of physical qualities that we just spoke about. So a tennis player needs to be strong, they need to be fast, they need to be agile. But if you look at American football, they need to be strong, they need to be fast, they need to be agile. So don't think that just because you play a certain sport, the training that you do needs to be massively different from that you see from a different sport. So rather than like an on and off switch when it comes to working physical qualities, I like to think of it as like a volume dial. So each sport needs something slightly different from the next. So as I said, we'll take two different sports again. So we'll say football and rugby. Both need to be strong, but rugby players need to be stronger, so we'll do more strength work for the rugby player than the football player. Football players maybe need to be more agile, so we'll do a little bit more kind of agility work. Now these qualities can kind of be broken down further within their categories, but today we'll just kind of stick to the ones that we mentioned there. So you're probably now beginning to see that your training doesn't need to be anything spectacular. It doesn't need to be something that's super different. You just have to get the basics right. So now we'll kind of go into how to develop each of those qualities that we spoke about before. So when you're talking about power, the two things that are important are the amount of force you can produce and how quickly you can produce that force. There's kind of two main ways to do this. One would be through plyometrics, and then the other would be through explosive movements like Olympic lifts or loaded jumps. There's a few different ways that you can kind of progress and categorise plyometrics, but one that I've been using recently and one that I think is helpful is McInnes Watson's version or his kind of way of categorising plyos. So what you're going to have is you're going to have a light tier. So that's going to be stuff that is kind of more locomotive in nature. So things that you're doing repeatedly, things that you might do 10 to 20 reps of, and they're not too strenuous. You're kind of focusing on being fast and bouncy. The next is going to be medium tier. These are a little bit more strenuous. You're maybe hopping for further distances, jumping higher distances, and they're a little bit more aggressive. They're a little bit more aggressive in nature. Then after that, you're going to have ping tier, which is the kind of tier above that again, where you're looking at being really stiff, putting a lot of force through the body, and then trying to output force really quickly. Then kind of below that, or not below that, sorry, supported by that, I think is the way he puts it, is deep tier stuff, which is again more kind of locomotive stuff, and you're looking to be bouncy. A little bit of each of these is best, and you're kind of progressing it in that manner where you're going to start with the light stuff. That's going to help you progress to the medium stuff, which should probably kind of be in your program all year round. And then that will help you progress to the heavier stuff. And in terms of prescribing volumes, plyometrics are quite individual in nature. So if you're someone who's maybe got a bit of an explosive background, then you're going to be able to do a little bit more. Say if you play like a sport like basketball or you do track and field, compared to someone like me, I'm a weightlifter, so I'm going to need to start off kind of on the lighter side of things because my body won't be able to handle, the big explosive movements. When it comes to explosive movements, weighted jumps and stuff, with my background, I really like the power clean. A lot of the time you'll get coaches telling you that the power clean is really hard to learn, and that it's not worth your time, but for me and the athletes that I have trained, I don't think it's particularly hard to teach, I don't think it's particularly hard to learn, especially if you're a naturally athletic person. You'll pick it up pretty quickly as long as it's broken down in a manner that makes sense, in a manner that makes it easy for you to pick up. I'll put that progression on the screen somewhere. What I like to do is number one, a front squat to make sure you can get into that kind of front rack position. Then from there, we'll move on to like a standing muscle clean, just so you're able to kind of understand what the arms are supposed to do in the power clean. Then we'll move on to a hang clean pull, probably above the knee, then below the knee. Then from there, we'll go to a hang power clean, and then from there we'll progress it down to the floor. I like to then add in variations to help you kind of understand each part of the movement. So you maybe do, once you're able to do a full power clean, we'll maybe do pause at the knee power clean, we'll do 3 position power clean, eccentric power clean, just things that so that you can get used to doing the power clean, feeling how your body should feel in each of those positions, and you're not getting too bored of it as well. It gives you a little bit of variation. You could progress it further into doing full cleans if that's something you wanted to do. I think that can definitely be beneficial, but it's certainly not necessary. With these, you can do sets of, when you're learning, maybe 2 to 5. When you're able to kind of nail power cleans, I would say anywhere from 2 to maybe a max 4, because what you're wanting is that kind of really violent output. And as you start to go past 4 reps, you just begin to get tired, and you're not really able to give it that same output. Strength is probably the most simple of these qualities to improve. So we can break down strength gains into neurological and hypertrophy gains. One is when you're kind of training the muscle to produce more force. So that's going to be heavier weights. So that'll be your neurological gains. Heavier weights, lower reps, less volume, and really challenging your muscle to output as much force as it can. Then on the other side, you're going to have your hypertrophy work, which is trying to help your muscles get bigger. This gives them more tissue and then helps you output more force basically in the end. They both have the same kind of end goal, which is getting you stronger, but it's 2 separate ways to go about it. What you find in most sports when you need strength and size is you'll do both. So if you look at rugby players, NFL players, they'll do a lot of hypertrophy work, but they'll also do a lot of like higher force, lower rep strength work. Then with sports that are like kind of weight class sports, MMA, boxing, that type of thing, you'll find they do a lot less of the hypertrophy stuff and a lot more higher output stuff. This is just because obviously muscle is heavy, and if you put on muscle you might struggle to get into your weight class. For force production, I like anywhere from 1 to 5 reps, somewhere maybe between 9 to 20-ish, 25 maybe at a push in a session. Wouldn't do too much more than that. And you want to focus at like 75 to 95% of your 1 rep max. Hypertrophy is going to be more like 6 to 20 reps per set. You can kind of go anywhere in that range, and you're going to be looking at 20 to 45 or 50 reps per session. To really drive that muscle growth, you want to not really be leaving anything more than 2 reps in the tank. Ideally, if you can get to one or 2 reps, that's brilliant. You don't need to push right to failure, especially if you're not a bodybuilder. You're not trying to get the most muscle growth possible. What you're trying to get is just a little bit to keep you moving in the right direction. So what you really want to be hitting when you're doing your strength exercises is going to be a squat, a hinge, a vertical pull and press, and then a horizontal pull and press. This lets you hit the kind of big movers in the body and then use accessories like isometrics, kind of smaller bodybuilding movements to kind of tick off the final areas and places that you need to work on. Finally, in terms of programming for strength, one thing you want to keep in mind is that volume and intensity have an inverse relationship. So as one goes up, the other needs to come down in a similar fashion. So at the start of a program, you're going to probably start with higher reps and lower intensity, and then as you move through that program, the volume is going to come down and the intensity is going to start to go up the way. That's a very simplistic version of it, but it definitely works for beginners and people who don't have loads of experience in the weight room. Next, when you're moving on to conditioning, so your kind of endurance, what we're going to be looking at is that realistically, the best conditioning work for you is going to be doing your sport. If that's definitely doable, if you do something that isn't too physical, isn't too high contact, because you can get a lot of minutes in and not have as much fatigue on the body. If that's not possible for you, say you play American football, rugby, and you can't just keep playing and playing and playing without, kind of sustaining injuries or loads of fatigue, that's when you want to kind of add in some extra stuff to sprinkle on top to keep you in top condition. So a few tips to go along with that: not redline every session, so not empty the tank to the point that you're vomiting every session, because what builds you an aerobic base is the amount of time that you can spend in a state of a kind of raised heart rate, so somewhere between 120 to 150 beats per minute. The more time that you can spend in that zone, the fitter you're going to become, basically the bigger base that you're going to build for yourself. It's not about how fast you can go and how quickly you can make yourself vomit. It's just about building that base and getting as much time in that zone as you can. Next is going to be the kind of improvement of other qualities. So this is when you start to see that all these qualities fit into one another and why you should be working them all. So the stronger you are, the less the game like scenarios take out of you. So just for talking, say, as I said there with strength, say you're a rugby player, The stronger you are, the less it takes out you when you go into a big tackle. If that makes sense, it's a lot more sub-maximal. It doesn't take as much out you, and then therefore that way you can recover quicker. You've not expended as much energy, so therefore you don't need to recover as hard. And then if your sport's more anaerobic in nature, you can add in a little bit of anaerobic work as well. Anywhere from 30 seconds to 10 minutes, just adjusting the effort level and the rest accordingly. So next we've got speed. So with speed you can break that down into two separate areas. So you've got acceleration on one hand, and then you've got top speed on the other. Now, if you've not done any sprint work, then you can definitely hit both of these in one session and you don't need to break them down too much. With your speed work, you're always trying to move as fast as possible. So if you've got a way of being able to track how quick you're moving, and you can see that as you get into the session, maybe after 7 or 8 sprints, you're now starting to get slower, just stop the session there. You don't get any added benefit from doing more. It all has to be high quality stuff. So I'll put some programming guidelines up on the screen so you can see those as well. And then in terms of exercise selection, for your top speed work, you want to be doing kind of flying 10 metre, flying 20 metre sprints. And then for your acceleration work, you want to get stuff in there that's going to improve your accelerating technique, so stuff that's going to keep you low to the ground. Things like sprinting from that kneeling position, from that lying on the floor position, just encourage you to get nice and low. Moving on to agility, that can again be broken down into kind of two separate areas. So what you've got on one hand is change of direction, and then on the other one you've got perception. So agility isn't just your ability to change direction quickly, it's your ability to change direction quickly whilst reacting to a stimulus. So whilst you will get a lot of this from playing, it definitely doesn't hurt to add in a little bit extra when and where you can. Drac Performance has a lot of really good stuff on this. I'll put a couple of his drills on the screen so you can see, but basically what you'll see for most of them is the athlete is reacting to a stimulus, as I said, so and then that from that position they then need to change direction really quickly, or accelerate really quickly, or decelerate really quickly. That's what's going to improve your agility. It's not things like predetermined agility ladders and stuff. That might make your feet move a little bit quicker, but that's going to be the kind of the sum total of the gains you get from doing that type of exercise. So putting it all together, how do you put the training for all of these qualities together? So the way I like to think about attributing training volume is to think of your total resources like a jug of water. Before we even get to the S&C stuff, we've got two main cups to fill up. So that's going to be your life stressors and then your sport training stress. Both of these things will affect your ability to train as hard as you can in S&C. So once you've filled up the cups of your kind of life responsibilities and your sport training stressors, we can then start to attribute your S&C volume. So again, if you think of each of these qualities like cups, you've got speed, you've got agility, strength, power, endurance. Then from that jug, what you're going to do is pour a little bit of your total resources into each cup. This is just dependent on your sport, where you are in your season, and how good or bad you are at that actual thing. So if your sport requires a lot of strength, a lot of your total resources are going to go into that. If it doesn't require a lot of strength, you're maybe just going to do a little bit, just enough to continue keeping you moving in the right direction. If you're in a sport where it doesn't require a lot of strength and you're really strong, you might literally have 2 sets per week where you're doing something relatively heavy just to keep your kind of maintenance gains there. Now there's definitely an element of trial and error when it comes to this method, but that means you can kind of get to know yourself and your athletes better. Next we need to figure out where the training of these qualities fits not only into the week but also into the session. So within a session you always want to do your high output things first, things that require you to be fast. So your sprinting, your plyos and your explosive stuff, that they're all going to be first, and it's going to be in that order. So if you're doing, say if we're talking like a full day for you is going to be sprint, plyo and then Olympic lifts, you want to do it in that order. Then you're going to move on to your strength stuff, so that might be for one day, it might be your hex deadlift is going to be your main lift, and then after that you're going to have a superset of dumbbell bench press and chin-ups. And then to finish off you're going to have your accessory work around that, so that might be some core stuff, some isometrics, just ticking off other things that are going to be helpful for your performance. In terms of the weekly structure, push-pull legs isn't going to cut it anymore. It's going to leave you too fatigued for your sport. It's going to put too much volume into areas that don't make that big a difference. What you find most S&C coaches do is they'll use the high-low method. So if we're talking say day one, that's going to be your high stress day, where it might be something like the training program we just mentioned, and then the day after, that's going to be your kind of low day, so it might just be some stretching and some skills practice. What you want to do as well is try and pair up all your hard stuff together. So if you know you've got a hard training session on a Monday night, you maybe do your hard training session and then you go and do your S&C stuff after. This might sound kind of counterproductive. You might think you want to space these things out, but what you really want is somewhere between 36 and 48 hours to recover from these types of days. So that's when the low day comes in, and you do that afterwards to allow you to still keep moving forward. But so moving on to the last thing, and that's going to be what sort of stuff you want to avoid. Now, if you don't have a lot of experience in S&C, this can be quite tricky. Novel things can appear very useful. You can look at something and say, oh, that looks really like my sport, that must be useful. But unfortunately, that's not really the case. A checklist I like to use when I'm trying to determine if something is a waste of time is, does this look overly like a sport or my sport? Or 2 on that list is it easy to tell what muscle group or what quality this exercise is trying to train? And the third one is going to be, is it unnecessarily complex? Does this look like someone's just flung 6 different exercises together, hoping that we'll get at least some sort of benefit out of it? If it ticks even one of these, it's most likely not very good. The truth is, the whole point of S&C is to raise the ceiling of your performance. And then what you want to do after that is use your sport-specific practice to try and reach that ceiling. The gym isn't a place where you want to try and completely recreate your sport, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is develop general physical qualities. And then, as I said, you use your sport and practice to apply those physical qualities to your sport. If you try too hard to replicate your sport in the weight room, unfortunately, you end up just doing a massive load of nothing. So that's the video for today. Hopefully that shed some light on the kind of very basics of S&C and allowed you to put together a somewhat decent program for yourself. If you don't feel like putting together a program for yourself, you can check the description. That'll take you to my Shopify, where you can get the all-round athlete program. That's 6 weeks of high quality training for just £15, so totally worth it. And if one-to-one training is something that you think you might enjoy, then you can contact me and we can get that sorted. Enjoy the rest of your day, guys, and thank you for watching.